In the far reaches of the galaxy, on a cold and forgotten world, stood a tower that touched the clouds. Its walls were black stone and silver metal, bound together with the strange technology of an ancient war. Inside this tower, hidden away from the eyes of both dragons and humans, lived a prisoner. He was no ordinary captive. He was the last of his kind, the Dragon Prince, the one who had been cursed by the universe itself. His wings, once mighty and filled with fire, were locked in chains that shimmered with alien light. The chains were not made by human hands or dragon claws. They were forged in the forges of the stars, bound by creatures who lived outside of time. And it was said that these chains could never be broken, not by fire, not by force, not even by the will of gods. The prince had been grounded forever. No flight, no sky, no freedom. Only silence, and a tower that had become both his home and his cage. The world had forgotten his name, but the legends had not. Across the colonies of men, whispers still told of the Dragon Prince whose flight would burn the stars. They said if he ever rose again, entire galaxies would fall. And so he remained in shadow, wings folded, waiting for the end of time. But fate is strange. And fate often hides in the smallest places. On one cold morning, when the sky above the tower was covered with red storms, a young human maid arrived at the gates. She was no warrior, no chosen hero, no powerful sorcerer. She was simply a girl, poor and unnoticed, sent from the Earth colonies to work in the forgotten corners of the Empire. Her duty was simple: clean the tower, serve the prisoner his food, and never look too closely at the one chained in the shadows. She was told not to speak to him, not to listen to him, and above all, never touch the chains. The girl was frightened at first. Everyone had warned her that the Dragon Prince was dangerous, that even grounded he was a creature of fire and rage. But when she stepped inside the tower for the first time, she did not see a monster. She saw a figure sitting in silence, tall and proud, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. His scales were dull now, his strength weakened by the curse, but there was something about him that felt ancient and sorrowful. He looked less like a beast and more like a fallen king. Day after day, she cleaned the cold halls and polished the broken armor that lined the walls. She carried trays of food to his chamber, leaving them on the stone floor without daring to look up. And every day, she told herself she would not speak. Yet the silence of the tower grew heavier, and her curiosity grew stronger. At last, one evening, as the crimson light of the setting sun fell through the high windows, she whispered a single word. "Hello." The Dragon Prince turned his head slowly, his eyes fixing on her. For a long moment, he did not answer. Then, in a voice that was both rough and regal, he said, "No one greets the grounded prince." His words startled her, but they did not frighten her. Instead, she found herself asking why. And that night, for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Prince spoke of his fate. He told her he was chained not because of crimes, but because of prophecy. Long ago, the stars had spoken that his flight would bring fire to the universe, that if he ever rose again, time itself would break. So the keepers of fate had bound him, sealing his wings with chains no living hand could touch. He laughed bitterly as he said it, but there was no madness in his voice. Only sorrow. The girl listened, her heart heavy with the weight of his story. She wanted to believe he was lying, yet his voice carried too much truth to ignore. Still, she was only a maid, and what could she do? The chains glowed with alien light, covered in strange patterns that seemed to move when she looked at them too long. They were beautiful and terrifying, humming with power. Every time she cleaned the room, she kept her distance from them, as though they might leap to life and bind her as well. But one night, when the storms outside shook the tower and the wind howled like lost spirits, she stumbled while carrying her tray. Her hand fell against one of the chains. The moment her skin touched the cold metal, the tower shook. The chain glowed brighter than fire, brighter than lightning. A deep sound, like the roar of 1,000 stars, echoed through the room. She pulled back quickly, her heart racing, but the glow did not fade at once. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Prince's eyes widened with something that looked like hope and fear. "You should not have done that," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Do you know what you are?" The girl stood frozen, her hand trembling. She had no answer, no idea why the chains had responded to her touch. She was just a maid, a nobody, a servant forgotten by the world. And yet, the chains that no god or beast could break had stirred beneath her fingers. Outside, Thunder split the sky. The storms grew darker, as if the universe itself had felt the change. The Dragon Prince rose slowly, his wings straining against the bonds, and for the first time, the girl saw the fire that still lived inside him. In that moment, she understood only one thing: fate had just shifted. And whatever path lay ahead, it had begun with her. The maid could not sleep after that night. She lay awake in the small chamber below the tower, her heart racing with the memory of the glowing chains. Her hand still tingled where it had touched the cursed metal, as though a spark had sunk into her skin and was burning quietly beneath. She kept asking herself the same question over and over: why had the chains answered to her? She was no chosen hero, no ancient warrior, just a simple servant sent to a place no one cared to visit. Yet the chains, stronger than fire, stronger than time, had trembled at her touch. She had not meant to awaken anything, and yet she felt she had stepped across a line that could never be undone. The next morning, when she climbed the spiral stairs with her tray, she felt the prince's eyes on her before she entered the room. His golden gaze was brighter than before, more alive, filled with something that unsettled her. He was no longer only a prisoner lost in sorrow. He was watching her now with sharp attention, as if she had become a puzzle he needed to solve. When she placed the tray down, she tried not to meet his eyes, but his voice stopped her before she could leave. "You touched the chains," he said quietly, but the words carried through the chamber like thunder. She froze, her back turned to him. "Do not deny it. I felt it in my bones." The chains shook as though the stars themselves cried out. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly, her voice unsteady. "I did not mean to. I fell. It was an accident." The prince leaned forward, the faint light reflecting off his dull scales. "Accidents do not awaken power older than time. Do you not wonder what you are? Why your hand can stir the locks that hold me?" She shook her head, fear rising in her chest. "I am nothing," she whispered. "Just a maid. A servant. I don't know why it happened." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, softly, almost like a prayer, he murmured, "Perhaps fate grows tired of waiting." His wings shifted against the chains, the sound of grinding metal echoing in the chamber. "Perhaps you are the key that time itself hid from the keepers." His words frightened her more than the chains, yet deep inside, some part of her felt the truth in them. She wanted to deny it, to run, to forget what she had seen. But the memory of that glowing chain would not leave her. She had touched something forbidden, and now it clung to her like a shadow. The days passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. Every time she entered the chamber, the prince watched her with the same intense gaze. Sometimes he asked her questions, about her life, her home, the colonies of men. She answered cautiously, always reminding herself he was dangerous, a creature chained for a reason. Yet the more he spoke, the more she realized he was not the monster she had been told about. His voice carried wisdom and sorrow, not cruelty. He spoke of skies filled with fire, of worlds beyond the stars, of ancient wars fought not only with weapons, but with fate itself. And still, her hand itched with the memory of the chain. She tried not to look at it when she cleaned the room, but her eyes always wandered back to its glowing surface. The patterns carved into the metal seemed to shift when she looked too long, forming symbols she almost understood, as if the chain was whispering to her in a language older than thought. One evening, the storms outside grew wild, lightning crashing against the tower's high windows. The maid carried her lantern through the dark halls, the shadows stretching like claws across the walls. She felt uneasy, as if something unseen was moving through the tower with her. When she entered the prince's chamber, she saw him staring at the chains, his eyes burning with strange light. "The stars are stirring," he said without looking at her. "They know you are here. They know what you can do." She set the lantern down carefully, her voice low. "I cannot free you. If I do, the prophecy will come true. The stars will burn." The prince finally turned to her, his eyes sharp as blades. "Do you believe that?" She hesitated. All her life, she had been taught to obey what the stories said, what the elders warned. But standing here, looking at him, she was no longer certain. "I don't know," she whispered. "Then choose," he said. "Will you believe the fear of others? Or will you believe what you see with your own eyes? I have been chained for centuries, girl. Do I look like a destroyer of worlds to you?" His words pressed into her mind. She wanted to answer, but no words came. He was dangerous, yes, but in his eyes she saw not hatred, but pain. The pain of being caged forever, of being silenced by chains he had not earned. That night, when she returned to her chamber below, she could not stop shaking. His voice haunted her. His eyes haunted her. And when she finally slept, her dreams were filled with visions she did not understand. Stars collapsing, skies burning, wings breaking free. She woke with tears on her face and the taste of ash in her mouth. The following day, when she climbed the stairs again, her decision was already burning quietly inside her, though she did not yet admit it to herself. The prince watched her as always, his gaze unblinking, as though he could see the thoughts twisting inside her. And as the storm outside raged louder, she felt a pull stronger than fear. Her hand reached out slowly, trembling, until her fingertips brushed against the first chain once more. The glow erupted instantly, brighter than before, flooding the room with light so sharp it hurt her eyes. The air shook. The floor trembled. The chain cracked with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. The dragon prince threw back his head, a roar tearing from his throat, echoing across the tower. His wings surged, pushing against the bonds as the first chain shattered into fragments of light. The maid stumbled back, her heart racing, her body frozen between terror and awe. She had done it. She had broken the unbreakable. The prince's golden eyes locked on hers, blazing with fire and something deeper, hope, hunger, destiny. "You have started it," he said, his voice trembling with power. "And now there is no turning back." Outside, the storm broke open, lightning splitting the heavens, as if the universe itself had just awakened. The tower no longer felt like the same silent place it had been. Since the first chain had shattered, the air inside carried a restless energy, as if the very stones were breathing. Strange lights flickered in the cracks of the walls, and the sound of distant thunder never left the sky above. The maid moved through the halls with her heart heavy, knowing she had done something that could never be undone. She had touched the forbidden, and now the universe seemed to be watching. Every time she entered the prince's chamber, the broken fragments of the first chain still glowed faintly on the floor, pulsing with ghostly light. The other chains, still bound tightly to his wings, seemed alive as well, humming with a sharp energy that made her skin crawl. The prince, though, had changed the most. His voice was stronger, his eyes brighter, and his presence filled the room with a fire that had been long asleep. He no longer looked like a prisoner fading in shadows. He looked like a king who was beginning to remember himself. The maid tried to keep her distance, to tell herself she would never go further, but the memory of that moment pulled at her constantly. She had felt power flow through her veins, a power that was not meant for someone like her. It frightened her, but it also called to her, like the sound of a door opening onto a secret world. And the prince noticed. He spoke to her differently now, with less sorrow and more command, as though he knew she had already chosen, even if she had not yet admitted it. "You cannot stop now," he told her one evening as storms shook the tower. "The chains have tasted your touch. They know you. They will not rest until you break them all." She shook her head, her voice unsteady. "I cannot." "The prophecy." "The prophecy is a prison," he cut in, his voice low and sharp. "It is the weapon they used against me. Do you not see? They feared what I might become, so they chained me with lies. But the stars do not burn because I rise. They burn because I am kept down." His words struck her like thunder, and though she wanted to deny them, she could not. She had seen the way the chain had yielded to her touch. She had felt the world tremble, not with destruction, but with release. Perhaps the prophecy was a lie. Or perhaps it was only half a truth. That night, her dreams returned, heavier than before. She saw visions of worlds turning dark, of dragons soaring through collapsing skies, of herself standing at the center of a storm with light burning from her hands. She woke drenched in sweat, the echo of the prince's roar still ringing in her ears. And when she climbed the stairs the next morning, her steps felt less like duty and more like destiny. The second chain waited for her, glowing faintly as though it sensed her approach. The prince's eyes followed her every movement, steady and unblinking. She stood before the chain, her hand shaking, torn between fear and hunger for the truth. At last, she reached out. The moment her skin brushed the surface, light burst once again, flooding the chamber. The chain cracked, splitting down its center, and with a thunderous roar it broke apart, scattering fragments across the floor. The tower shook violently, the very foundations groaning as though the earth beneath were alive. Outside, the storm grew wild, lightning tearing the sky open. The maid fell to her knees, her heart pounding as the fire of power surged through her veins once again. The prince spread his wings as far as the remaining chains allowed, his roar shaking the walls. His eyes burned like suns, and his voice thundered, "The sky remembers me." But far above the clouds, in the endless black of space, something else had stirred. The breaking of the second chain had sent a signal, one that reached far beyond the planet, into the watchful machines that drifted between stars. They had waited centuries for this moment, and now their time had come. The watchers, neither human nor dragon, opened their eyes once more. The maid knew nothing of this yet. She only knew that she had crossed another line, and that fate was unraveling faster than she could control. She turned to the prince, her voice trembling. "What have I done? What is happening to me?" "You are awakening," he said, his gaze fierce. "You are the hand that fate feared. Do not fight it. Embrace it. Only you can set me free." His words filled her with both terror and a strange, burning hope. But before she could answer, a sound split the air, one she had never heard before. A high, metallic scream, echoing across the sky outside the tower. She rushed to the window and saw them, dark shapes cutting through the storm clouds, their bodies glimmering with unnatural light. They were not birds, not dragons, not machines she recognized. They were hunters, sleek and merciless, drawn by the breaking of the chains. The prince's eyes darkened as he rose to his full height, pulling against the remaining bonds. "They have come," he said. "The keepers of fate. They mean to kill you before you can finish what you have begun." Her blood ran cold. The storm howled louder, the hunters circling closer to the tower, their lights glowing like eyes in the dark. She realized in that moment that the prophecy, the chains, the prince, all of it was bigger than she had ever imagined. And now the universe itself had turned its gaze upon her. The walls shook as the first hunter struck the tower, its claws of light carving into the stone. Sparks rained down, the halls trembling. The maid stumbled back, staring at the prince, fear and desperation in her eyes. "What do I do?" she whispered. The prince pulled hard against his chains, his voice booming with urgency. "You must choose, girl. Fight for me, or fall with me." The hunters screamed again, their lights growing brighter, as the tower began to crumble under their assault. And then the door to the chamber shattered open, as the first hunter stepped inside. The chamber filled with a light so sharp it burned the eyes. The hunter that entered was like no creature the maid had ever seen. Its body shimmered with shifting plates of silver metal, but its shape was alive, not machine. Its arms were long and thin, ending in claws of radiant fire, and its head was a mask of shifting symbols, glowing with patterns that moved like rivers of stars. It stepped forward without sound, each movement smooth and precise, as though it belonged to another reality altogether. The maid froze, her breath trapped in her chest. She could feel its gaze even though the hunter had no eyes. It was not looking at the prince, it was looking at her. She understood in that instant what the prince had meant. The hunters were not here to guard him. They were here to erase her. The dragon prince roared, pulling against his chains with fury, the sound shaking the chamber until dust fell from the ceiling. "Run," he thundered. "They will kill you." But her legs would not move. The hunter raised its clawed hand, light gathering at the tips of its fingers, a weapon forming from pure energy. The maid screamed as the light shot toward her. At the last instant, she threw up her arms to shield herself. To her shock, the light did not strike her. It bent. It curved around her like water around stone, slamming into the walls instead. Stone shattered, the tower groaning with the force, but she remained untouched. The hunter hesitated for the first time, its shifting symbols flickering. The prince's eyes widened, his voice low and fierce. "Yes, it is you. You are the one. They cannot touch you because your blood remembers." The maid stumbled back, shaking her head. "What are you saying? What blood?" The prince strained against the glowing chains, his wings shaking with fury. "Long ago, before men and dragons became enemies, your people and mine were bound by a pact. A covenant older than the war, older than the curse. You carry that blood still, though you never knew it. That is why the chains obey you. That is why the hunters fear you. Another scream split the air as two more hunters entered the chamber, their bodies glowing with lethal light. They moved with terrible grace, stepping across the shattered floor as if gravity itself bowed to them. The maid felt their attention fixed on her, cold and endless, like the gaze of the stars themselves. Fear surged through her veins, but something else burned there too, something deep and unfamiliar. Her hand trembled, glowing faintly as if the spark from the chains had settled beneath her skin. She felt a pull, a voice without words guiding her, telling her that she was more than she had ever believed. The first hunter struck again, its claws sweeping through the air, but this time she did not flinch. She raised her hand, and the light bent once more, crashing harmlessly into the ground. The impact shook the floor, but she remained standing, her eyes wide with shock. The prince's roar shook the walls. "Do you see now? You are not powerless. You are the key the prophecy never spoke of. Free me, and together we will break the keepers of fate." The maid's heart raced, torn between terror and belief. She wanted to deny it, to cling to the simple life she had once known. But that life was gone now, shattered the moment she touched the first chain. The hunters would never let her leave alive. She had already chosen the path, whether she wanted it or not. The hunters moved closer, their claws raised. The tower cracked as another blast shook its walls, stone raining down from above. The maid stumbled, nearly falling into the prince's chains. Her glowing hand brushed against the third lock, and at once the chamber erupted with blinding light. The chain screamed as it cracked, splitting open in a surge of energy. The tower shook violently, the air bending and warping as if time itself was tearing apart. The maid fell to her knees, clutching her head as visions poured into her mind, futures that were not hers, worlds that never existed, dragons soaring through skies that burned with alien fire. When the light faded, she gasped for breath, her body trembling. The prince strained forward, now half unbound, his wings stretching wider than before, their scales glowing with fire. But the chamber no longer looked the same. The stone walls shimmered strangely, and outside the windows, the sky was different, sharper, brighter, filled with strange constellations she had never seen. The prince's voice rumbled low, heavy with awe. "The chains do not only hold me. They bind time itself. With every lock you break, the world changes." The maid staggered to her feet, her mind spinning. "What do you mean? What happened?" "Look," the prince said, his golden eyes fixed on the sky beyond the window. She followed his gaze and gasped. The world outside was no longer the storm-darkened land she had known. Dragons filled the air, hundreds of them, soaring through skies lit with fire. Below, great cities rose, built not by humans but by dragonkind. This was not her world. This was another. Her knees weakened, terror flooding through her. This is impossible. The prince's gaze was steady, unyielding. "This is the truth of the prophecy. Each chain is a thread of fate. Break one, and the pattern of time unravels. You have already shifted us into another future. And there are still 3 chains left." Before she could respond, the hunters screamed again, their symbols glowing brighter, their forms twisting with fury. They too had shifted with the broken chain, but here, in this new world, they were even stronger. They raised their claws, energy gathering for a strike that would tear the chamber apart. The maid's body shook, her hand still glowing faintly, but she felt drained, as though the visions had stolen the strength from her bones. She looked at the prince, fear and desperation in her eyes. "I cannot fight them. Not again." His voice thundered with urgency. "Then free me. Break the chains, and I will fight for us both." The hunters moved closer, their light filling the chamber like fire. The maid's hand hovered over the 4th chain, trembling with both fear and destiny. She knew that breaking it would tear another hole in reality, that it would drag them deeper into a storm she could not control. But if she did nothing, the hunters would kill her before she could take another breath. Her hand touched the glowing lock. The chain shuddered, the tower groaned, and the air cracked like glass. And then everything around them shattered. The tower was no longer whole. When the 4th chain cracked, reality itself had splintered like glass struck by a hammer. The maid fell forward, her vision filled with flashing lights and collapsing skies. The floor beneath her dissolved into nothingness, and for one terrifying moment she felt herself falling through a void without end. The roar of the dragon prince echoed across the emptiness, his wings straining against the last of the glowing locks as the world itself seemed to crumble around them. Then, suddenly, there was ground again. Hard, black stone beneath her palms, heat pressing against her skin. She gasped and looked up. The chamber of the tower was gone. They now stood upon the surface of a world that burned with fire and shadow. Great rivers of molten rock cut across the ground, glowing like wounds in the earth. Above, a dying star collapsed in the sky, its red light spilling across the horizon as if the heavens themselves were bleeding. Planets tore apart in the distance, their fragments spiraling into the black void like shattered bones. The maid staggered to her feet, clutching her head as the dizzying visions faded. Where are we?" she whispered. The prince lifted his head, his golden eyes glowing fiercely in the dying light. "A broken system," he said. "A place where fate has already failed. Each chain you break pulls us deeper into the threads of time. We are walking through the ruins of what could have been." Her stomach turned at his words. She looked around at the burning world, the crumbling skies, the endless storms of fire. This was not a living place, it was a graveyard of stars. The thought that her hands had torn them here filled her with horror. "I didn't mean this," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't want this." The prince looked at her sharply. "Fate does not care what you want. You touched the chains. You set the storm in motion. Now you must see it through." Before she could answer, the air tore open with a sound like screaming metal. The hunters emerged again, stepping out of the void itself. Their silver bodies shimmered with brighter light here, as if this dead place fed them. Their symbols burned across their shifting faces, patterns moving faster than before, filled with anger. They spread their long arms wide, their claws of fire crackling with unbearable heat. But this time, one of them spoke. Its voice was not like any sound she had ever known, it was sharp and cold, like glass shattering in her ears. The words were not in her language, yet she understood them as if they had been carved into her mind. "Every chain you break kills a world," the hunter said. "Every choice burns a universe. Do you think yourself savior, child? You are the end of countless skies." The maid staggered back, her face pale. She shook her head violently, her voice breaking. "No, no, that can't be true." The hunter's glowing body stepped closer, its voice colder still. "Look around you. See the grave of sons. This is what you have made. This is the fate you carry." The prince roared, his wings clashing against the two chains that still held him. "Lies. They twist truth to bind you. Do not listen to them." But the maid's heart was torn. She stared at the broken star above, at the burning rivers below, and wondered if the hunters spoke truth. Could it be that each lock she broke destroyed another possibility? Could it be that freedom for the prince came at the cost of infinite worlds? The hunters raised their claws again, light gathering for another strike. The ground shook, cracks splitting the burning earth. The maid cried out, lifting her glowing hand. The power rose inside her once more, bending the hunter's energy around her. But the effort drained her faster this time, leaving her trembling and weak. She stumbled back, nearly falling into a pit of molten rock. The prince's voice thundered across the collapsing world. "You cannot fight them alone. Free me. Let me rise." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him. His wings stretched desperately against the chains, his scales glowing with fire, his eyes burning with rage and hope. She wanted to believe him, to believe he was not the destroyer they claimed. But the words of the hunter still clawed at her mind. "Every chain you break kills a world." The hunters advanced, their lights filling the sky like fire. She had no choice. With a cry, she pressed her hand against the fifth chain. The lock screamed as it cracked, a surge of energy blasting outward. The world around them shuddered violently, the molten rivers splitting wider, the dying star above collapsing faster. Time itself bent, the sky twisting into a whirl of collapsing universes. The maid fell forward, visions tearing through her mind, endless skies, endless deaths, countless worlds unraveling as her hand shattered the lock. When the light cleared, they stood in another world. This time, the air was cold and silent. They were surrounded by ruins of stone towers, broken cities that stretched for miles, all swallowed by frost. Snow fell gently from a grey sky, covering the dead world like a burial shroud. The maid gasped, falling to her knees. She could feel the silence pressing against her chest, heavier than chains. Another world. Another fate destroyed. She could not stop shaking. The prince looked around, his wings stretching wider now with only one chain left. "We are close," he said, his voice fierce. "One more lock, and I am free." But before she could answer, the hunters appeared again, stepping out of the air like ghosts. Their voices filled her head with a cold truth that froze her blood. "Break the last chain," they said, "and you will not only destroy a world, you will shatter the weave of time itself. All that ever was, and all that ever could be, will burn." The maid stared at the final glowing lock, her hand trembling. The prince's eyes burned into hers, filled with desperate fire. "Do it," he said. "Free me, and I will fight them all." The hunters closed in, their claws of light raised to strike. The snowstorm howled louder, the ruins trembling. The maid's heart raced, caught between terror and destiny. Her hand hovered over the final chain. And in that frozen silence, she knew the next choice would decide the fate of every universe. The snow fell thicker, swirling in the icy wind that cut through the ruins of the dead world. The maid stood trembling before the dragon prince, her breath white in the freezing air. Around her, the hunters circled, their silver bodies glowing, their shifting faces filled with burning symbols. Their voices pressed into her mind, colder than the frost that covered the earth. "Do not break the final chain," they whispered as one. "It is the lock of time itself. If you shatter it, all threads will unravel. Every past, every future, every world that might have been will collapse into fire. Do you wish to be the end of all things?" Her body shook with fear, but the weight of destiny pressed harder still. She looked at the prince. His wings stretched wide, held by only a single glowing bond. His eyes blazed like suns in the cold darkness, fierce and unyielding. He was so close to freedom, so close to reclaiming what had been stolen from him. "Do not listen to them," he thundered, his voice echoing through the ruins. "They are liars, keepers of chains, servants of fear. They bind the world with stories of doom so no one dares to fight them. I am not the end, girl. I am the beginning. Free me, and together we will burn a path to life again." Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that freeing him would bring hope, not destruction. But the hunters' voices cut through her thoughts, sharp as blades. "You have seen it with your own eyes," they hissed. "Each chain you broke left another world in ruin. Stars falling. Skies burning. Futures erased. And now you stand at the last lock. Break it, and there will be nothing left. Not one world, not one sky. Only fire without end." The maid closed her eyes, her tears freezing on her cheeks. The visions of all she had seen crashed inside her mind, the molten rivers of the dying star system, the dragons soaring in the alternate sky, the silence of the frozen ruins around her now. All of them were real, and all of them had been broken by her hand. She opened her eyes again and saw the prince staring at her, his gaze softer now, almost pleading. For the first time, he looked less like a king and more like someone afraid to be left alone in the dark. "Please," he whispered. "I have waited centuries. Don't leave me chained. Let me fly once more. I swear to you, I will not destroy. I only wish to live." The hunters raised their claws, light flaring so bright the ruins trembled. "Choose," they demanded. "Save existence, or burn it with him." Her glowing hand hovered over the final chain, trembling with both fear and longing. She could feel the heat pulsing from the lock, the weight of universes pressing against her skin. One touch would decide everything. Her breath caught. Her heart screamed. And then, ending option 1, the flight of hope, light ending. With a cry, she pressed her palm against the final lock. The chain shattered with a blinding roar, and in that instant the sky itself tore open. Fire and storm ripped through the ruins, the ground splitting apart, the hunters screaming in fury as their light flickered and died. The dragon prince spread his wings wide for the first time in centuries, his scales blazing with golden fire, his roar shaking every corner of existence. He rose into the storm, carrying her in his arms as the ruins fell away beneath them. The hunters were gone. The chains were gone. And for the first time, she felt the wind of eternity rushing past her as the prince soared higher and higher into the stars. Perhaps the prophecy had been wrong. Perhaps fate had always feared what it could not control. The maid looked into the prince's glowing eyes, and in them she saw not the end of worlds, but the spark of a new beginning. Together, they vanished into the sky, leaving the broken ruins behind, two figures who had defied the stars and shattered destiny itself. Ending option 2, the price of freedom, dark ending. Her hand touched the final lock, and the chain shattered with a scream that split the very fabric of time. The dragon prince roared in triumph as his wings unfurled fully at last, blazing with fire brighter than the sun. The hunters shrieked and dissolved into nothing, their symbols breaking apart like smoke in the wind. For a brief, shining moment, he soared free, rising above the ruins, his wings filling the sky with golden light. The maid reached for him, tears streaming down her face. But the light spread too far, too fast. The hunters had not lied. The final lock had not only freed him, it had undone the threads of existence itself. The frozen world cracked apart, swallowed by flames. The sky fell into darkness. She screamed as the ground vanished beneath her, her body torn into the storm of collapsing time. The last thing she saw was the prince's face, his golden eyes wide with sorrow as he realized the truth. His freedom had cost the death of everything. His roar echoed through the void, not with triumph, but with endless grief. And then, there was nothing.